If you're sick to death of all the hype around AI and how it's going to change your world and take over jobs and all these sorts of things, and really all you're trying to do is work out how do I use it in my business to actually improve my profitability or to gain market share or to make my life easier, there's just so much noise out there. It's driving me nuts seeing it, and I'm sure it's driving you nuts seeing it. So what I want to do today is I want to take you through a process that we've been going through for the past 6 to 8 months, literally working out where we can use AI, not only in our business, but in our clients' businesses. And I'm going to give you insight. And so I want to talk about the 9 ways you can turn AI into your business's secret weapon. So this is going to be a bit of a long conversation, but I want to take you through the process so you understand exactly where you can use it, how you can use it, and not get distracted by all the hype. So let's start with the fundamentals. Well, when I talk to people about running businesses, and I've been doing this for 25 years, I've been coaching businesses and I've been coaching business owners to become successful. And one of the things I realized is at the very start, people run businesses for different reasons. But the one most common word that I hear when I talk about people running businesses is they run a business so they can have freedom. Freedom to choose when they work, freedom to choose how much they earn, freedom to choose what they do every single day. But ultimately, it's just freedom, right? Which means I've got the flexibility to do what I want to do when I want to do it. Now, in order to get freedom in business, you actually need to have a bit of flow. So the business can't be an idea. It actually has to have cash flow. It needs to have workflow. It needs to have people actually delivering the product or the service. So when we get flow in a business, it starts to drive us towards freedom. But one of the problems that we have is for people to get flow within their business, they need a bit of fuel. Now, fuel in this context is cash, right? So we know cash is king in business, and in order to grow a business, we need cash because we know growth sucks cash, right? So we need the fuel to create the flow, to create the freedom. And the fundamental flaw that most people have is that they're not in business, they're in busyness. So what they really need is they need the focus, okay? So we've got the 4 Fs. Focus is knowing which way I'm going. Fuel is how do I cash flow this puppy. Flow is how do I get it moving so it doesn't depend on me anymore. And freedom is the ultimate goal. What I wanted to do in this video is break down each one of these and show you how AI will actually improve this for your business and for you. So let's start at the start. I want to start with focus. Okay. Now, focus is a super interesting topic to me, right? Because I do watch lots and lots of people in business and they go into overwhelm, right? They're really not sure what to do next. They're busy, but they're really just running on a treadmill. And the solution to the focus problem, the easiest solution that I came up with was a thing called the GPS. Now, I use the GPS as a metaphor because we all know what it is. It's a device that we have on our phone or in our car, and it uses satellites to actually give us an exact location for where we are right now. Now, in its own right, it's sort of cool to know where you are. But without setting any direction, it's a bit sort of useless because it's just got a pretty map and it shows us a dot on the map. In our business, there's 3 elements that we need to get this GPS to create for us. And the first one is what I'll refer to as vision. Now, this sounds a bit weird, and I'm going to ask you a question and I'm going to get you to jot this down if you haven't answered it before. What will my business look like when it's finished? So when we talk about vision for business, some people think in terms of next month, I just need 2 new clients. Some people think about next year, I'd like to grow by 25%. Some people will even go as far as 2, 3, or 4 years. My minimum scope for creating vision for business needs to be 5 years, but I like the idea that you are building to an end game. In other words, what will my business look like when it's finished? Now, finished could be sold, finished could be under management, or finished could be that it just runs the way that you want it to run to get your freedom. So first step, get into your AI bot. I don't care whether you use Grok, I don't care whether you use ChatGPT, and I don't care if you use Gemini, it doesn't matter. I want you to ask this question. The question is, I want to build a vivid vision for my business for 5 years' time. Now, you will start a conversation with your AI, and it will evolve by asking you questions and giving you sort of specific things to answer so you can start building this picture of the end game. Now, why this is important is if you think about the GPS in your car, you sort of need to drop a destination into it for it to do the work. Now, when we talk about doing the work, well, what is the work the GPS does? It takes the destination you plug into it, it calculates the route, and it calculates that route using a whole lot of different information. First of all, the roads that are available. Second of all, the traffic conditions on those roads. And there might be some third condition that you don't want to pay tolls or you want to avoid dirt roads, but you'll give it some condition so it can create what I would refer to as a plan. Now that plan is literally giving you a turn-by-turn list of all the things that you're going to have to do to get to that end game. In business, what this looks like is it's the GPS, or in this case it'll be your AI bot, will look at your vision and it will start working backwards to work out what the priorities are and where your focus and attention needs to be right now. Now, how that looks in the car is that you're driving along, you don't care what turn 17 is, you want to know, do I turn left or right at the end of the street? So your plan for your business is literally about saying, to get to my vision, do I turn left or right at the end of this street? Or in business terms, what should I be focused on right now? So we've got two components that we're going to use AI to develop for our business, and you can do this through any chatbot. You just need to ask questions and go through this engagement. Now, the last piece of this puzzle is super important. The GPS also needs to have some sort of tracking capacity, right? So it needs to look at where you are and check back in on the map, because if you take the wrong turn, we need to reroute. So in a business, the tracking will incorporate things like revenue, profitability, which are lagging indicators. Usually indication is that they have a dollar sign in front of them. But we also want to track leading indicators, things like number of appointments, number of proposals, number of leads, number of widgets that we generated this month. So same thing, I want you to go into your AI and I want you to ask questions around what are the key metrics that I should be tracking to make sure that we're on track for the plan and that we're heading towards our vision. Now, these are unusual questions to be asking a AI, because most people use AI just to do spell checking or to improve emails. Now we're starting to ask it strategic questions and engaging in a conversation that's going to clarify where I should focus my time and energy. So this is stage one. We're really just working at this base level, and we've started working out what the focus is. And we've identified that we need to use the GPS. Sometimes we can refer to that as the growth planning system, to actually give us some guidance to make sure that we're getting the best use out of our time. Let's move to the next level, which is really quite important, is the fuel level. Right? As I mentioned at the start, cash is king in business. So the fuel level in a business is making sure that we're getting new clients and we're delivering the service and we're getting paid. Okay, so I refer to this as the cash flow engine. And the reason I refer to it as an engine is it's something that should be running without you physically having to be involved with that. So let's look at some of the elements of this. This section really has two elements. And for most people in business, it looks like this. It's a seesaw, right? And on one side of the seesaw, we've got acquisition. And that includes things like sales and marketing. So how do I get new clients to join my program, or how do I get new clients to see my product or to buy my service? So acquisition is about marketing and sales, okay? And once someone actually says, yes, let's go ahead, or let's buy the product, and they transact with the dollars, we move to this other side, which is known as delivery. Now, the reason this is so critical is the majority of businesses that I meet, the owner themselves is heavily engaged in the cash flow engine. And what this causes is this anxiety between, I need to get new clients, I've got too many clients, I've got to deliver the service, so stop the marketing, start the marketing. And as you can imagine, if I was driving a car by slamming on the brakes and slamming on the accelerator, I'm going to be using a lot of energy. So the cash flow engine in a business is about balancing the acquisition side and the delivery side. And when you think about what that means, it means that we need a system for acquiring clients, and we need a system for delivering our product or service. Now, when we talk about delivering product or service, what we're actually referring to is the initial engagement, number one, but it's also about the ongoing engagement. And so we measure acquisition through a thing called acquisition cost, which is how much does it cost to acquire a client. And over on the delivery side, we measure delivery by what's known as lifetime value, LTV, right? So these are the two metrics that we can use in the tracking to actually see whether our cash flow engine is functioning. The real issue is that most people aren't spending time building this as a system. They're literally on one side of the seesaw or on the other side of the seesaw, and so they're constantly running back and forward. So in terms of how we use AI to improve these two elements, well, acquisition is pretty easy, right? I go into my AI bot and I explain who I am, what my business does, who are the people that I serve, and then I ask questions about how do I find more of these clients. And the AI will go through a process of starting to develop your marketing plan for you. Now, marketing comes in a couple of flavors. The very first one is, how do I find the target market that I'm looking for? So how do I find the people so that they know who I am? How do I engage with them so they like me? And then how do I get them to transact? In other words, how do I get them to trust me? So acquisition usually covers know, like, and trust. And so then once we actually get know, like, and trust working, we can move to the delivery side. And so the AI will give us a plan. It'll suggest some channels for us. You need to work with the AI because sometimes it'll spit out some hallucination, or it'll come up with something that you're not interested in doing or don't even understand. Little side tip. If AI gives you information you don't understand, ask it to dumb it down. Ask it to send it back to you so that a 12-year-old can understand it, and it'll rewrite the document so it's more interpretable. If you are reading output out of an AI and it makes no sense to you, stop. All right, because it could be wrong, it could be false, or it just could be a totally irrelevant. It could be hallucinated. So we're going to work on this marketing plan, and we're going to end up with know, like, and trust, and we're going to use this to build out a marketing or an acquisition engine. Okay, and what it means is we can now get predictable inflows into our business. Now let's talk about service delivery. This is the secret area where most profit is lost. What I mean by that is people sign a deal with you, they buy a product from you, and they move into what's known as the try, buy, and repeat section of the business of the Cashflow Engine. Now, think about what that means. Try means they spent their first dollar with you. Their expectation is that they're going to check you out. It's like you go to a restaurant for the first time. You're going to order a meal. You're going to eat the meal. You're probably going to pay for the meal. But you might walk out that door and say, that was okay, but I never need to go back to that restaurant. In other words, we went from try, but we didn't go into buy or repeat. In your business, your first engagement with a paying client is them putting you on trial. We need to make sure not only do we impress them, but we also showcase all of the other ways that we can continue the relationship so we can extend lifetime value. The AI hack for this would be to have a look at your current product or service that you're selling. You might have a document that explains it. You can upload that into AI, and then you can ask questions about how do I increase lifetime value with my current client base. There's usually 2 or 3 different ways that the AI will suggest, depending on your industry. But the quiz is it about selling more to the same people? Or is it about just making sure that they're aware of all our products and services? Or if you have something that's ongoing, like a membership or a service agreement, how do we make sure that we can extend past the current level? Now, one of the issues that we have is most people don't know what their acquisition cost or their lifetime value is in their business. My suggestion, you can use AI to do these calculations. All you need to do is take your P&L and literally upload it into AI and ask it to determine the acquisition cost. It will come back at you and it'll ask questions like, how many clients did you get during this period? And it can work out then the average dollar spend. It can work out the expense that was used to acquire them. So you'll actually establish an acquisition cost. And so now we're starting to use AI to do strategy within our fuel layer or our cash flow engine of our business. Easy to do, difficult to find time to do if you don't understand the tech, number one, or if you're busy in busyness. And that's why we went focus first. So you'll notice now we've identified how to maintain focus so you can actually build your business. And now we've started to talk about how do we feed this thing, right? How do we make sure there's enough fuel, enough cash so that we can grow this business? In both areas, there's 5 different things that you can challenge AI for. It'll give you answers and it'll start building out your plan for the future. But in this section, you're going to start seeing workflows for how we can consistently acquire clients and how we can consistently deliver value to clients so we can extend the lifetime value of a client. Now, this is really cool, but often people who are especially self-employed or small players will stop here because they'll run out of capacity. And if you're running out of capacity in your business, that's when we need to start focusing on the next layer. So the next layer is all about flow. Now, what does flow mean? Flow is a process. Think about a river. It just means that the water keeps flowing down the river, but the river facilitates the flow. So if you are the river, in other words, if the cash flow is generated on your effort, I have a couple of questions for you. The first one is you're in a high-risk scenario, because if you don't deliver, you do not get paid. So in other words, if you're sick, or if you want to take some time out of the business, or if you're distracted by other things, the cash flow will be impacted. If you have a system, and if you have people or service providers that are offering to facilitate that system, you will start to see flow through the business. So you're not getting paid wages for time, you're getting paid profit for production. So when we talk about flow, what we're actually referring to is building a self-managed team. Now, here's the funny part, right? The best kept secret that I have learned in my 25 years of coaching business owners is finding and keeping good people. Now, the reason most people don't do this is they cannot afford wages or they've been burnt. Now, either way, if it's that you cannot afford wages, go back one step and start working on the cash flow layer or the fuel layer. If it's about you being burnt, it's probably that you're not an expert recruiter. In other words, you don't have the skill set to find the right people, and you're probably not even attracting the right people. Now, here's the beauty of where AI kicks in. There's 3 elements that we need to focus on to not only find the right people, but keep the right people. The first one is your recruitment. Now, when we talk about recruit, I'm talking about how do I find the right people to help me scale my business. Now, the traditional ways would be using things like Seek to advertise a job, or it might be that you go through word of mouth or referral. Now, when it comes to recruitment, one of the issues that we have is that as you build a business, you really need to be clear on what are the functions that you need within that business, and then you need to go and find people that can facilitate that. Where AI kicks in here beautifully is that it'll help you define things like your organization structure. And I want you to think about future structure, not current structure, because I want to start finding people that will fulfill the future requirements of the business. So on the recruitment side, you literally jump into your AI bot and you start asking questions. I want to build my business and I need to work out who I should employ next. Now, just by dumping that question in, it will start to quiz you on the functions within your organization. If you did the first exercise that we talked about, which is about vision, it now has a reference point. So it knows what you're trying to build. It knows how you're going to get towards that. It's going to now be understanding exactly what your product or service is because of the discussion around cash flow. And so now when we start the recruitment process, the AI already has prior knowledge and prior structure, so context. So as it starts giving us things like job ads, position contracts, KPIs, all of these things are going to be directly connected to the vision that you instigated in the first instance. So the first part of this process of finding a self-managed team and improving flow within the business is recruitment. We need to go into the market, and not dissimilar to how we did acquisition of clients, we're going to acquire team members. So we need to define who they are, number one. Then we need to create a job description and an ad. And then what we need to do is run the process. Now, the process, unfortunately, is emotional. In other words, what I'm saying here is that people who are looking to recruit really aren't being objective about who they recruit. They're listening to a person, they're sitting down in an interview, or they're reading a resume and they go, oh, this person sounds amazing. But they have no proof, right? They just have words on a piece of paper or words through a conversation. Your recruitment should be a process of using objective mechanisms to measure the performance of a candidate. Now, I know this sounds a little bit complex, but this is where the AI kicks in. You go to an AI bot and you say, I want to recruit people for my business. It's going to start giving you a structure. If you work within our infrastructure, the Leverage OS, as I'm explaining it to you, we've tuned the bots to do this so you get really good ads and really good job descriptions and really good recruitment processes, including structure for interviews. And also, so how do I determine who the best candidate is? The AI will help you build that sort of process so you're picking the right people. Now, getting them is one thing. Keeping them is another thing. There's 2 more elements to recruiting this self-managed team. The second one is that we need to be able to delegate. Now, delegation is an interesting art form, and I'll call it an art form because it requires 2 people. It requires a delegator and a delegatee. Now, what I mean by this is when I employ someone, I can give them a job description and I can give them a very specific function within the organization. But unless I delegate effectively, there's a risk that they're going to do what they think is right versus what I want them to do. So delegation comes in a couple of different flavors. The first part of delegation is making sure you're clear on what the output of a role or a function within the organization is. The second part of delegation is the training, right? I need to make sure that the person that I employ has the skill set and the knowledge to actually function in the required function within the business. Now, what this means is we create some sort of onboarding for team members that includes training on the basic workflows of the business, going back to Cashflow. We have some sort of function for them to report metrics so that we can see how they're tracking. And what this does is it allows us to let them do their job with us only watching on the metrics, so watching the dashboard to see that things are in line. Now, if you do this right, you will get productivity out of your team members. And then the last piece of this puzzle is the ones that you want to keep, you want to develop. And what I mean by that is you're going to have team members that are awesome. And as you train them, they become more valuable. And as they become more valuable, two things will happen. Their paycheck will probably go up, but also their contribution to the business will go up. So my suggestion is building teams of high value participants. Some people will be ambitious and they'll need to be developed. Other people will be just happy doing the day-to-day activity that you require of them. Your job as a manager is to work out which ones are wanting to move and which ones are wanting to stay. Because if we don't train them, if we don't develop our people and they stay, that's way, way worse than not developing them or developing them and they leave. You understand the metaphor, right? Going back to how AI helps here is I would suggest that in your AI bot, whichever one you use, you have a chat for every team member that you have. You have a process for monitoring performance and putting personal development plans in play so that we can grow our team over time. Now, if you do this well, you will start to build soldiers within your organization that will run the operating system for you. Now, the beauty of all of this is if I have the right people on the bus and they're doing the right procedures and we've got a clear picture of where we're going, we're starting to see a real business. In other words, the business that doesn't rely on the effort of the owner anymore, it's now starting to become quite a substantial ecosystem that produces profit. I want to talk about the last one. So we've talked about 5 different ways that you can use AI so far. You can use it to create development plans. You can use it to delegate. You can use it to recruit. Over here, we talked about acquisition. So you can use it to create your marketing process, lifetime value, the customer experience within your organization. And the bottom 3 were that we create our vision. We have an active plan that we're using, so it reminds us what we should be doing day by day. And we have a dashboard so that we know we're on track. So we've got these 3 elements in place. And the last element that I really want to touch on is this idea of freedom, okay? Because remember, one of the main purposes of running a business is to produce an output. And so freedom to me is different to freedom to you. So for some people, freedom is about working less hours. For some people, freedom is about having more money than I need. I don't know what it is for you. You need to establish that in your vision process because that becomes the top of this equation, right? And so freedom to me requires 2 things. Let's talk about what it is in essence. Freedom, in my mind, is leverage. Leverage, by definition, means doing more with less. So if I do less in terms of the day-to-day operation of my business, I have more time to do the things that I should be doing. Now, this freedom section requires you to become what I would refer to, other people refer to, as a leader within the business. Now, a leader has 2 primary functions within a business. The first one is obviously to lead. And so when we talk about lead here, lead to me means being able to see what's going on in the marketplace and predict the future and make decisions. So lead to me is about having prediction. Now, here's the good news. AI can help a lot here because AI can do things like market research for you. AI can do things like picking trends in marketplaces. AI can do things like help you understand how to shift the direction of the business to accommodate what's going on in the economy. You know, right now we're going through this AI boom, right? It's coming to the marketplace. Everyone's all starting asking questions about what is it, what can it do? For me, the question is, how can I use it to leverage my business? And if you start asking questions like that, you will start to be able to see how it can play out, and you can start to predict the future. The second part of leverage for me is innovation. Now, the thing I love the most about innovation is innovation sets you apart from your competitors. Because if you're innovating, that means you're creating things that other people haven't done, haven't thought of, haven't had time to do. But what you're doing is you're innovating and improving an industry or a product or a service. Now, the beauty of these two things here is they're super high value activities. The problem is that most business owners do not invest enough time in leadership or in innovation because they're stuck down in the engine room. So where does AI play here? Beautifully, right? In leadership, you can do all the market research, you can do trend analysis, you can actually ask it to help you understand where your industry is going, where your market's going, and what the next set of products need to be. Innovation. There's a term that I use a lot, and you might have heard of it. It's called Kaizen. And it gets spelled many different ways, but today I'm going to spell it this way. Kaizen is about incremental improvement. And incremental improvement requires you to challenge the status quo. In other words, how can we do it better? How can we go faster? How can we provide more value? How can we reduce the cost of delivery? How can we? Now, these are hard questions, but with an AI bot assisting you in this strategic thought, you will get lots and lots of ideas. And the idea about being in this leverage mode often is starting to think about ways that we can do things better. Because as soon as you can do things better than your competitor, you can outperform them. But if you're too busy delivering the service to even think about evolving your product, you're going to end up in a scenario where you're in a price competitive market. So what I would suggest with the innovation side is you literally take your current process or your current workflow or your current product and you drop it into AI and you ask, how can we improve on this? Now, that's not hard to do, but it's going to give you answers, and those answers need to be processed, assessed, and decisions need to be made as to whether this is something we want to do or not. And this is part of the leadership component. So we've talked about 8 different ways today that you can use AI to actually help improve your business, not just writing better copy, but actually helping you strategize. I did mention number 9, and I want to talk a little bit about number 9 because number 9 is probably a pretty obvious one, but for most people, they're not thinking this way. I read a good book a few years back by Grant Keller, and it was called The One Thing. And it was a book that helps with time management because the majority of people I meet have a time management problem. And the problem they have is they say, we don't have enough time in our day to get things done. I've got too many priorities. And I will always challenge that because the truth is you have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just like every other person on the planet. Time is not your issue. Priority is your issue. And so when I read this book by Grant Keller, it's called The One Thing. And the statement that he makes, the whole book talks about one thing, right? And it says, if I looked at your to-do list and I looked at every item that you have on your prioritized list, whatever it is, and I then asked the question, what is the one thing on this list that will make everything else on the list either redundant or easier? This is what we call high leverage activity. Because once you establish that there's things on your to-do list that make everything else on the to-do list easier, they're the things you should be working on. So when I asked that question of my to-do list, and AI was number 27 on the to-do list as something I should look at, it pointed out that if I mastered AI, not mastered it as in became an AI programmer, but mastered AI in terms of understanding how the tool can be used to improve all elements of the business, that would make everything else easier. So let's have a look at this in context. When we talk about the people in business, we say, look, here you are as a business owner, and you're pretty happy. You're running along, and every day you've got challenges, and these challenges show up, and you deal with these challenges. So, you're pretty good at getting over the hurdle. But then there's another challenge, so you've got to do it again. And it sort of becomes this cycle of exhaustion. What I found is that when I have challenges every single day, after a while, all I can see is challenges. One of the first solutions to solve that problem is to create a thing called vision. And that vision needs to be so big that when I'm looking at it, my challenges become smaller in relation to my vision. And that's really one of the important elements of why you need a vision first. So let's go back to the point that I was making, which is the hack number 9 on how you can use AI in business. Here you are. There's your vision. There's your goal. There it is. And we can see it because we defined it. But the problem is we really haven't got there yet. We might even have a roadway, and the roadway usually goes this way and not the way we think. To climb this mountain, we don't go straight up. We go this way. We go like that. We actually navigate the roadway to get there. Now, what does that look like in business? Well, here's vision. And so that's the why. Why are we in business? Okay. Then we've got this road, and this road represents what's called mission, also known as the how. How do we get to the goal? And then what we have is these signs on the road, and these signs on the road are milestones. And those milestones really are represented by goals. Okay, goals. So how do we know we're on the right path, and how do we know we're on track? We follow these road signs, and they say, yes, only 5Ks to your destination, only 4Ks to your destination. But the point I'm making here, right, is that there's a lot to do, right? And we can map this to how business owners do run their business, because when we're down at this bottom level, the engineer level of our business, we're usually in what's known as the technician job. And the technician's job is to run around in circles, serve clients, make sure everything gets done until we're exhausted. Not an ideal scenario, right, for a business owner, because we suffer from burnout. If we're good and we start building our team, we move into the management layer. And at the management level, we're not doing the work anymore, we're supervising. So we're making sure that the team in the business are doing their job. So the manager's job or purpose in life is to look back into the business and make sure that everyone's doing their job effectively. The last function that every business needs is this leadership function that we talked about. Now, the leader's job, as we assessed, is to look forward into the marketplace, into the industry, and into where things are going so that we can predict the future. Now, the reason I show you all these is because when we talk about effective hourly rate or how much you're worth as a business owner, the techs get paid for their time. The managers get paid for the productivity of their team. So they're already leveraged, right? Because they can have more productivity by having more people. The leader gets paid for strategy, for predicting the future, for showing people how to do things better, for helping the team understand that more is possible than they believe is possible, but for picking the market. My challenge to you is that you need to start moving away from technician towards management, and then eventually spending more and more time in leadership. Now, when I talk about the one thing, and I talk about the only way that I believe you can do that, is I think that AI is what's called a structural change in business. You know, we see things like cyclic change all the time. You know, so the weather changes, it gets hot, it gets cold. The economy goes up and down like a yo-yo. We have recessions, we have depressions, but then things recover. Other things are structural. In other words, when they come in, they don't go away. And I think this is where AI is, right? It's a structural change. And so when you realize something is structural, it's not a matter of if I should learn it or which is the best widget. It's about saying, I know it's going to be part of the future, so I need to understand it. So my suggestion is, if there's anything on your to-do list that is AI related, there should be one on there that says, how do I become a master of this new tool? How do I learn how to use it on a daily basis? Right? And I'm not talking about spell checking, and I'm not talking about writing nice emails. I'm literally talking about, how do I use it to strategize my business? How do I use it to automate my workflows? And how do I use it to assist my team in increasing the value that they produce? Because once you start to master how AI can be integrated into a business, the game will change. So hack number 9, and I'm going to suggest you do this, is we developed a program called Jetpack. And we developed this program with the metaphor or the idea of this guy, right? So you know who that is. That's Iron Man, right? Now, Iron Man is not Iron Man at all, right? It's Mr. Stark in a suit. The guy inside the Iron Man costume is a human. So when we use the jetpack metaphor, what we're saying is you still need humanity. You still need people. Actually, you can't run a business without people, right? Because someone has to buy the stuff and someone has to deliver the stuff. I want you as a business owner to realize that you can harness the energy of a jetpack, the AI systems, and you can use that to do things faster, smarter, more effectively than people who don't have a Jetpack. So the Jetpack program is a 6-week program that we created last year. And we created this program with the idea of arming a business owner with awareness and knowledge of how to use AI on a day-by-day basis. Part of the 6-week program is actually creating the discipline of using AI as a strategist within your business. When you join Jetpack, you will meet Jet. Jet, for those people who don't know, it looks a bit like this guy, right? So Jet is a bot. He's over here on my left-hand side. Jet is our AI bot that does strategy. Now, you can use your own. It doesn't need to be ours. But if you join the Jetpack program, you will get access to Jet. Jet knows everything we just described about and is an expert at helping you transition into the world of using AI as a tool within your organization. Now, to get access to Jet, all you need to do is join Jetpack. Now, I'll put a link into the notes below so you can find it if you wish. You don't need to. You can do all this on your own, right? But it's going to take time. And to make it really easy for you, when you go to the Jetpack landing page, there's a good explanation of everything that's involved and everything that is in the Jetpack program. We even make it super easy just to try it before you start. So you can do week 1 and see what you think. And if you think it's useful, continue. And if you don't, you can stop right there. So all I'm going to suggest to you is there's 9 ways. And I'm going to say 9 ways. So I'm going to do it this way. 9. You count the numbers. There's 9 ways you can use AI to improve your business. The majority of people I meet aren't using any of these. They're using AI to write better emails. And if that's all you're using it for, you're leaving a lot on the table. My suggestion is you make a decision that you need to learn more about this tool and how it can be used by me, or you, I should say, your team, to actually improve the value that your company is creating. Because if you don't, your competitors probably will. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And my suggestion is the early adopters in this world of AI are going to create the lion's share of possession of a marketplace, because you will gain market share when you move faster. And I think AI is not really artificial intelligence. It's accelerated innovation. You've got to use these tools to move faster, not just to sort of, do some party tricks. So if you're confused about AI and you're not sure what to do about it, you can reach out to our team. We can help you understand how to implement it as a business tool. You can follow some of the direction from today, so start using it today to start answering some of the problems. If you need assistance with this, please reach out, because I know that some people are overwhelmed and confused by what AI can and can't do. But I also know that once you start using it, you won't stop, because it's not difficult, it's not complicated, it's just a matter of knowing what to ask. So I hope this information has been super useful for you. Please reach out to the team if you have any questions about how to use AI in your business, or if you're not sure if this is going to be for you. We're happy to have that conversation. But other than that, I hope you got some good value out of today, and I hope that your business is successful.